Welcome to justUS, a podcast by two close friends all about self-care, wellness, and social justice at a big age. My name is Tashara Halyard.
And I'm Margot Lindauer. We're here.
Finally, we've been talking about this podcast for years as a way for us to just explore all the things that really matter to us and I think matter to many people.
I think that's more, yes, that we have seen and worked and lived a lot in the last 12 years. And we want to kind of delve into it all.
Absolutely, especially for those of us who are just sick of the news, right?
Sick of the news, sick of bad information, sick of feeling burnt out. And wanting to engage, but not knowing how to engage.
Absolutely. And who want to have tough conversations, but there's not always a safe space to do it.
And to do it with some flair.
With some flair. So we will be having conversations around all the things that make us who we are, but also I think that make us healthy and whole, right?
Yes.
In the way that we define it.
And I think that one of the things that, and I'm not saying that we've done it perfectly because I don't think anyone has, but that's been really important to us, particularly over the last couple of years, is how we're going to sustain ourselves in doing work that's hard.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I know that you kind of have been thinking and talking and working in this space for a long time, and I confronted a lot of these things over the last 2 years as well. And so this is not personal to us. This is something that many people experience, and particularly people during this phase of life.
And I should say that we are both attorneys. That's how we met. But we are now reformed attorneys.
Yes.
And that we are
Do you know what I
doing things
did
our way.
to actually stick my whatever in becoming a reformed attorney?
What did you do?
I went inactive with the bar.
Good for you. Good for you.
Because I was like, if I'm active, I know I'm gonna pick up some cases. And while I totally could, I just really don't want that for myself.
We want something different, and that's what justUS is all about. It's something different. It's claiming that difference and being bold about it, even when we're afraid.
And I think it's also questioning a lot of the messages that we get about how people can engage in work and how they hold themselves in that work.
Yeah, what work looks like, period.
Right.
How we define labor.
And why does work have to look a certain way when none of us look the same way?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And so obviously justUS is a play on the word justice. We spell it like just us because it's just us friends. We've been friends for a very long time.
We have.
And so I am so happy that we are in this space together.
I'm so thrilled.
Let's get started.
Let's get started. We have our first sponsor,
Yay!
Wine Press. Wine Press is a wine store located in Brookline, Massachusetts, and in Boston. They have two locations. Incredible wine store hosting lots of live events this fall. So if you're in the Boston area, stay tuned and check out the winepress.com website and their Instagram. Wine Press is a women-owned and BIPOC-owned business owned by Aaron and Jyoti Mehta. They're also wonderful friends, and they're our first sponsor. And so we're thrilled and grateful. And in the course of their sponsorship, we're going to be doing two things. We're going to have a drink of the episode, and they also very kindly gave us a discount code that will be applied to gift baskets that we are going to put together with stuff that we love and can be shipped. Unfortunately, just because of shipping regs, they can't ship wine and alcohol. But if you're in the Boston area, in Massachusetts, definitely check them out. They have wine clubs, they have in-person events, they have all the alcohols and beers. And speaking of non-alcoholic choices,
cheers.
Our drink of the episode is called a Lear's Amalfi Spritz. It's really delicious. It's a sparkling, non-alcoholic spritz with flavors that are distinct and contemporary. This is taken from the website. They don't just mimic, they have their own distinction as a premium non-alcoholic beverage. Our mocktail of the day.
So it's giving me Aperol spritz, right? That's what it's meant to taste like. But I also think there's a little bit of a placebo effect going on because as I sip it, I feel very nice. Very nice.
I think that's placebo.
Mm-hmm.
But I also think there's something interesting that we're going to delve into, and that's how do we celebrate? And I think that we've been socialized to celebrate in very specific ways. Alcohol is one.
For
you
sure.
and I have talked about this a lot, particularly as women. And I think sometimes we just need something a little special, a little different that's not
Yeah.
water, coffee, whatever. So mocktails are great options,
This is
not just for
great.
pregnant people.
Was that also on their website?
No, but I just added that.
Thank you, Wine Press.
Thank you, Wine Press.
So the podcast is called justUS. What does justice mean to you?
There's a lot of, I don't even know anymore.
Talk about it.
I think to me, justice equals some level of meritocracy that we've talked about doesn't exist, equal access to institutions and social programs that doesn't exist, equal access to representation and protection and health and food and transportation and housing that doesn't exist. And so I really come at it from this lens of where people interact. And, we're in a city right now and there's so many different levels of access right in this like 1 mile radius, right? We're in Brighton right now.
Yeah.
And I think it's especially timely, well, there's so much stuff going on, but back to school, right? And where your children or where are children going to school?
Absolutely.
Is it safe? Do they have busing? Do they have lunch? Do they have breakfast? Do they have after school? How are they getting there? Do they have good teachers? Do they have a safe place to be themselves? To learn, to grow. And so I think that's how I think of justice. I think from a professional, practical standpoint, I've been a lawyer for a long time and representing individuals in Massachusetts in the district court system, which is the lowest level state court. And so I've seen how different individuals get different treatment based on a lot of different things, but socioeconomic access and race and proximity to power is one of them. And so I got tired of that. What about you?
That's a beautiful answer, first of all.
Well, thank you.
It's very beautiful. I think of justice as liberation. I think of it as an action, right? It is what we do as we pursue what it means to be self-determined as a people, as a community, as a country. It takes us standing in justice and holding space for, I think, accountability when harm is done. And I think what that looks like needs to always start with community.
What does liberation mean to you?
Liberation means freedom. Liberation means free of any construct that prevents us from being healthy and whole. And that can be like our own minds, right? That could be fear. It could be negative self-talk. It could be trauma. But it oftentimes is also systemic, right? Because those traumas and fears often come from a form of structural oppression that either ourselves or those around us are dealing with.
And we perpetuate it.
And we perpetuate it, exactly. And so justice looks like being free of those types of things, right? Being free from harm in whatever way it is caused and holding any harm doer accountable.
We're going to talk about that because what does that mean with our judicial system?
Exactly. Which is really in many ways a carceral system, right? That just seeks.
Do you think liberation is something that you will attain in your lifetime? Or are you liberated, I guess is a better question.
Am I liberal? I should ask you that. Am I liberated?
I mean, you're liberal. And you're liberated in lots of ways. I can't answer that for you. I don't live in your body. I mean,
Yeah.
I think you live your life as a liberated person.
Yeah.
But I
try to.
think you still have fears
Absolutely.
that maybe you don't talk about, but you're aware of.
Yeah.
And so I know that there are lots of places and settings that you go to that you don't feel safe in.
Yeah.
And so do I think you're liberated? No, but not because of you.
Yeah. I think that If I felt like I was liberated, I would be like, what's the top of the hierarchy? Self-actualized, right?
But you can't.
I,
You can't make that determination, right?
right.
Only the like.
Only the
Isn't the
who?
Buddha?
Oh, I'm talking about Maslow's hierarchy.
Oh,
What? How we got to talk about Buddha?
wait, but how do you?
Does
Who
he know
decide?
Buddha?
Who decides if you're self-actualized, Shira?
There's probably like a tool online that you can just check the boxes.
I know what Tashara's thinking, but she's not saying it.
What am I thinking that I'm not saying?
Gabby Bernstein.
Look, I love any kind of personal self-help guru, and I am tired of the shaming
I'm not
that I get from
shaming
you on a
her.
consistent basis,
I'm not
Margot.
shaming her. I've
You
done.
told me people who have changed my life were basic. This is what you told me. Just because she wants me to write I love myself 100 times every day. I don't think that's basic. All right. So, and that's part of justice for me. Holding space for personal growth, development, and liberation.
And doing it in concert maybe with community that doesn't feel the same.
Yeah.
And so I think one of the things that I'm excited to talk about on this podcast is how these issues fall with us and others who are living through this stage of life, but also how they've impacted others maybe as they are exiting the stage of life. So specifically like our mothers, I mean,
Yeah.
my grandmothers are not alive, but Tashira still has her grandma. And so for those of your followers who are listening, maybe some of them saw the incredible conversation you held last year with your mom
My mom's best friend.
and your mom's best friend about sex
and dating in white toenail season.
but from a mother's perspective.
Yeah.
Like after becoming mothers.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think we need to have more of those cross-generational spaces, as you know, we will get into very, very soon. So we're going to go into our next segment of dumb shit men say. Dumb shit men say. And I have to say it was difficult for us to narrow this down.
And we're really trying to keep this on point and in time with the filming of the episodes. We're filming in the fall of 2022. There's a lot going on.
There's a lot.
There's a lot going on locally. There's a lot going on nationally. There's a lot going on internationally. And men are at the helm of a lot of that. So we'd like to pick our first quote of the episode.
This one is by Senator Ted Cruz. For those who don't know, he's a Republican from Texas. And in speaking about the recent student loan debt forgiveness that Biden has worked hard on, he said, if you are that slacker barista who wasted 7 years in college, if you can get off the bong for a minute, it could drive up turnout. Get off the bong for a minute, Margot. I've been telling you that for years.
It's been my issue. What do you think about it?
I think
there's so many layers. So first layer.
Yeah, okay. Layer one. Let's talk about this idea of wasting 7 years in college and just the idea of how we live in a pretend meritocracy in this country, as if you could go to college and be able to support yourself, your family, etc., with just a college degree anymore. That is extremely difficult. So it is playing into this kind of rugged individualism, pull yourself up mentality that we know is very much associated with this country and also very much a lie.
And violent, because it's selling a reality that actually isn't available.
To so many people.
To most people, unless they're from some level of generational wealth.
Exactly. So what about getting off the bong for a minute?
I don't really even understand what he's talking about. I think it's this assumption, right, that people go to four-year colleges and waste their time and don't earn a skill or learn a trade and then can't get a job. And so they end up a barista. Which is a real job.
Is a great job.
And really hard. And a job that's very hard to support oneself.
And a job that this society needs, right?
Right.
Like, we need baristas.
Right. And you don't need a college degree to be a barista.
Right.
And so the idea that there are a lot of people who are going to college, like you said, and can't get a job that's salaried or needs a certain degree, I think is actually an indication of how the system isn't working. But he's not talking about that. He's talking about the individuals who go to four-year colleges, who waste their time, smoke pot, fuck around,
Right.
and then like continue to fuck around playing as a barista.
He's playing as a politician. I mean, there's there is, if anyone's pretending. But you know what? I also think that, let's go back to your point about what it means to be self-sufficient with a college degree or with any level of education. Margot and I are both attorneys. We met at Georgetown. She was a fellow in a law clinic, and I was working there for the summer.
And a law student.
And when I graduated and got my first job in public interest, you remember this, right?
I have a similar story, so I want you to share.
I was working part-time at anthropology.
Well, I remember you and I having a conversation because you were working full-time in legal services, part-time in anthropology. I mean, a lot of your followers know this. Tashira has always had an affinity for shopping, and you couldn't afford your rent. And we had a conversation about living within your means.
Yes. Yep.
But notwithstanding, you couldn't support your rent and your loans with your salary.
No.
And
No.
when I graduated from law school, I had 3 jobs. I was part-time staff attorney in legal services. I was doing court-appointed child welfare work, and I was tutoring Spanish to pay for my loans. And I was talking to you about this. I had remembered that my now husband and I moved in together during my 3rd year of law school. So we were cohabitating. He had a full-time job, and I still, we were sharing rent, we were sharing utilities. And I still had to have multiple jobs to support myself.
And this is a career and
that's with a graduate degree.
This is what I'm saying. So, this is a career that people assume is one that is supposed to be highly successful, is highly coveted, and even for us, in the way that this society is set up, it's systemic, right?
And I also just think there's a very strange assumption that people who get to take advantage of this very minimal, I mean, kudos to Biden for getting this through, but very minimal benefit are somehow taking advantage of a system that benefits corporations and individuals all the time in different ways with different tax credits or whatever.
Girl, let me tell you something. When was the last time Amazon paid taxes?
Well, I don't understand that.
Right. I don't understand that. And I also feel like, again, we have to be considerate of the place that we are politically and what has been able to pass. But here's what I think of. My level of student loan debt, as someone who put myself through law school, the amount of money that I am being handed is like someone giving me $5.
Right. And so it's so interesting because...
What you want me to do with that?
Right. So, right. And there's another horrifying statistic that the average white person who has student loan debt, I think, in the area between $20,000 and $30,000. So the $20,000 is actually...
It's pretty significant.
Going to be significant.
For sure.
And the average Black graduate who has student loan debt has over $50,000.
Yep.
And I can speak from my own very, very privileged experiences. I was able to pay off my student loans this year, in May of this year, and I am so thrilled that something passed, and I don't give a shit that I didn't get to benefit from it because I wasn't the one who was supposed to benefit.
Yeah.
Not everything is for everyone.
Hey, man, it's called equity.
Right.
Yeah, it's called equity. The difference between equity and equality, because we don't all start at the same place.
But it's also just so strange because so many people, including some of the people who are critical of the student loan relief, benefited from the PPP loans or tax breaks or get to benefit from, if you're super wealthy and you make a donation, apparently if you're super wealthy and owe hundreds of thousands of dollars in taxes, if in that year, if you make a tax deductible donation to like a nonprofit or to multiple nonprofits, you get to take that out of the taxes you owe.
Yeah, I mean, there are so many ways that
People screw around with taxes.
wealth is constructed in this country. I mean, it's why poverty exists. And so the entire point is to demonize people for making poor decisions when really it is structural and it has been designed in this way.
But it's also so circular, right? Because what people are criticizing is people who went to college,
right?
Which is what
we're told to do.
We're telling
no,
people to
girl,
do.
You were supposed to pay for it. You were supposed to pay for it on your own.
I also just think it's so predatory, just in general. When I was taking out my loans for law school, I had no idea what I was signing.
Yeah, me.
They sent me stuff. I signed it. I had loans that were up to 9% at one point.
Oh my God.
Right? Because the interest rates and whatever.
Right.
And so there's so many issues with all of it, but we're told to go to college. People go to college. People try to get training. They can't independently live and pay their loans.
Right.
And this is a very small benefit.
Well, and also let's talk about how college doesn't have to be the amount that it is. Like it doesn't have to be as expensive as it is. And so
who are the people paying?
So this crisis that we have with student loans starts with the incredibly ballooned amount that it costs to go to school today. It was not always this way in this society. And so I've decided this, Margot. Listen, I'm taking my student loans to my grave.
Yeah.
I got too much Chanel shopping to do. I have too many places to travel. Do you see what I mean? I'm not denying myself because of a student loan. I did what I was supposed to do, right? My grandma and my granddaddy said, go to college, become an attorney. I checked my boxes. I was a great student. I worked in public interest. You see what I mean? And so now I'm not going to deny myself because somebody wants their money back.
So you checked the boxes. You did everything you were supposed to. I did too, in very similar in different ways. And there's one more part of, I think, the student loan crisis that is not talked about a lot, but I do feel like I have a little bit of insight coming from a large university, particularly a law school. Law schools pay students to come to their law school to screw around with the metrics. So second and third tier law schools will give students full rides or partial full rides, not based on need, based on metrics, based on LSAT scores, and based on undergrad GPAs. And guess who are the people who have the 180s and the 175s? They're not first-gen students.
Absolutely not.
And so I'm not speaking as a representative of any specific institution, but I saw this happen at a lot of schools that I worked at where students were able to go to law school for free or close to free, even if they came from families who could have afforded to pay for law school and end up going into big law,
making tremendous
salaries, or going into public interest with no student loan debt.
Yeah.
And then there are this larger group of first generation students, and particularly brown and black students, who do not statistically has high scores and have not come from as elite institutions, who are taking out student loans to pay to go to the same school. And that's a little known. I mean, maybe everyone knows that, but I did not know that.
No, I did not know that. And I also think, just anecdotally from my own experience, thinking back to my colleagues in law school and the kind of choices we were making around what we were going to do for a career, to be able to go into public interest is such a gift. It really is. But it is where, in many ways, we are the most needed because we are the clients who are being served. And so, as you know, Margot, that's why we go into so many of these legal services organizations, and the entire staff, they're all white. However, those who are served are all BIPOC people, right? So there's this disconnect because in many ways, when Black and brown students are able to go to law school, to finish, to pass the bar, to check all of these boxes and these barriers, we're like, we cannot afford to make $45,000 a year. We've got to go to a big
No one
firm.
can afford to make $45,000 a year.
Not in America in 2022.
No.
But alas, here we are. So
okay, thanks, Ted Cruz. Thanks for that.
Thanks for that. Get off the bong, people.
Or get on the bong.
Or get on the bong. Cheers.
Cheers. I think I need some more Amalfi Spritz over here. Just going down so smooth. Okay. So what can we look forward to? This is our first episode. This is our introduction to Just Us. As Tashira has mentioned, we've been wanting to do this. Well, we had this kind of dance about this for a long time where one of us wanted to do it, the other didn't, and back and forth. Can we make this happen? And hopefully some of the people who are listening today got to see some of our lives.
Yeah.
But I think it's important to go back to the beginning of those lives because it's really the beginning of when I can only speak for myself, where I really believed that this could possibly happen. But it was really born out of your generosity and you feeling bad for me. So I unfortunately, or fortunately, it's actually been quite a gift. Almost a year ago, had a very serious surgery. I had a double mastectomy. And Tashira, also a breast cancer survivor, and we're going to talk about this month as it is Breast Cancer Awareness Month, I think was feeling a little worried because whenever she would call or text, I was always on the couch, which was a very comfortable
It's
couch.
a nice couch.
It's really nice.
Yeah.
And started asking if I wanted to talk about, I don't even know what the first thing was.
I think we were talking, what we were talking about? Cults. Remember we were talking
wait, because I was so obsessed with documentaries on cults.
I remember.
And mid-level marketing.
Yeah,
schemes,
MLMs. Yeah.
Which
are the same thing.
Which are cults.
Yeah.
And it just went from there. And so I'm so excited that kind of what has turned into a real thing really came from your generosity.
No one was feeling bad for you, Margot.
I mean, maybe people really wanted my expertise on cults.
I think that people find you and us very engaging.
Okay, but P.S. We're trying to get someone on the pod.
Yeah.
On the pod.
Is that what we're calling it?
On the us. With us. Who was in a cult.
Mm-hmm.
A friend, a family member of one of my close friends just got out of a cult.
Yeah, I mean, I low-key think I was in a cult.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you want to talk about that?
We should talk about all the things. And we've lived a lot of life at a big age.
Yeah, we have.
And that's the good part.
But we've
about
lived very
this.
different lives.
We have.
And we've had very different life experiences. And I think that's actually something that's going to be really interesting because we've had very different life experiences, but have lived together in community for a long time now and hopefully forever.
Yeah.
And I think we're going to talk about all the things that are important for a lot of people during this phase of life. Not to say that people who don't identify as women or who are not a big, ripe old age can't enjoy this podcast. But I think there's a lot of things that no one talks about with being in this phase of life. And what we see is really curated.
So let me ask you this. When we say big age, right? I think that that's important versus maybe saying midlife because everyone doesn't see themselves in midlife.
So that's so interesting. So when I've started talking, I don't know what your experience has been, but when your family members or friends ask what the podcast is about, I've tried different things because I want to see what lands.
Okay.
And I saw my uncle and aunt at a family gathering 2 weeks ago, and they asked what I've been up to. I said, I'm starting this podcast with my best friend. And they said, what it's about. And I said, midlife. Because I didn't think they would understand big age. And they said, well, what do you know about midlife?
See?
And I said, well, I am 41. And that, of course, triggered a lot of things in them because I'm their niece. And,
yeah.
Right. And they were really kind of disoriented about me claiming that identity.
Yeah, exactly.
Because I think some of the boomers still feel like they're in midlife.
They're in midlife, absolutely. And I think there are people who are younger than us, but close to our age that would not see themselves in midlife. So last night, for example, I was talking to a friend and I was describing another friend as being my age. So she's like 37, 36, she's my age. And the friend was like, she's not your age, she's not 40.
Fascinating.
And I said, but she's closer to 40 than she is 30, so how is she not my age? And I was like, round up. And she said, no one rounds up with age. Like people
round down.
They round down. They don't round up.
So here's another interesting thing that I'll want to talk and unpack with you is that over the last year, I've made a lot of friends. So if we round down, are 30.
Okay. Wow. Yeah.
And even if we do the math and what is it called, rounding, right? They're under 35.
Yeah. But do you find that you have similarities? I mean, obviously they're your friends.
I mean, similarities, sure, but also a lot of differences. I mean, I don't, you know this. I mean, I like meeting people with energy and if we get along. And so life experiences are one thing that can bring people together.
Yeah.
I have had a harder time making friends with people exactly in my same life circumstances. Though not, I mean, I do have friends who are exactly 41 who have kids.
Yeah.
Who I've met through my kids or met through stuff like that. So yeah, we have stuff in common, but a lot of stuff not in common too.
Which I actually appreciate. And I also realize that as a queer person who's not married, who doesn't have children, I think my friends kind of run the gamut, right?
Yeah.
It's so funny because you and another best friend had your oldest daughters on the same day, the
And our
same
second
year.
daughters.
And so it's like all
Isn't
of my friends started like on this very like same track. And I wasn't, right? And I
Right.
love being an auntie and I don't have a problem with that. But what it means is that for like those people who are my age, they very often live a completely different lifestyle than I do.
And I feel like you also have a lot of friends who have decided not to have children by choice.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. Which we will also get into in a future episode.
But I think there's more, right? I think, having children and what it means to be maternal is something we're really going to unpack because I think our country in particular has a really fucked up relationship with what it means to be maternal and what that looks like.
Yeah.
But all other things, like what does it mean to have fun? What does it
pleasure mean?
Right. What does pleasure mean? What does it mean to be independent? Or, I, over the last year, have started some new things. And I've gotten, a lot of support, obviously. I mean, I don't need people to support me because I'm making my own decision, but I've gotten a lot of pushback from other people who are similarly situated. Like, how do you have time to take a photography class?
No, because they don't have time and that's their business.
But no one has time.
Yeah.
Everyone's busy.
Yeah.
Or, how do you have time? I took a trip by myself for the first time and it was a big thing. I've always wanted to do it. And when I was better after all my surgeries, I took 6 days and went away by myself, which was amazing. We'll talk about travel a lot. And similarly, like, I can't believe you left the kids.
Also, I think the benefit of being a big age, that we can make these types of decisions and they don't mean as much to us as they once did.
Or other people's opinions don't mean
right,
as much.
That's what I
that
mean.
would have crushed me 5 years ago.
That's what I mean. Absolutely. That we get to decide how we live our lives. And we hope that this podcast inspires folks to do the same.
There's also another big part of this podcast that I think really brings in our professional and practical training. Also a timely issue, which is reproductive justice and social justice. And so when we're talking about issues that impact individuals at a big age, we're also going to be talking through different lenses. And one of those lenses is through reproductive and social justice with an intersectional lens. And we're going to try to be really inclusive of lots of different opinions, not just ours. And we don't always agree.
Exactly. Yeah. The slap heard around the world, I think, is a good example of that with Chris Rock and Will Smith.
We did talk about that.
We talked about that. We did.
We disagreed.
We disagreed on it, which I think is amazing because there also need to be more spaces where people can lovingly disagree.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes. And I think that how people treat one another and what constitutes a violent act is also something that's deeply personal. And we're going to talk about it because it coincides with all the things.
All the things. Speaking of all the things, let's talk about the fact that associated with justUS are going to be many opportunities to connect with us.
Yes.
We will have products. We will have an online community. What else will we have?
We're going to have at least 3 in-person events this year, 2 hopefully in the next couple months, 1 in the Boston area, 1 in DC, and then stay tuned for maybe a retreat or a weekend away. We have a lot of really exciting things happening, and I think you can also expect to see a lot of this, but also some really interesting guests.
Absolutely. And we will have about 8 to 10 episodes per season, around 30 or so episodes a year.
And we have to give big ups to my daughter Ella for this. We're going to have an offshoot of the podcast to debut soon that is going to be for the younger people.
Yeah.
And I think one of the things that's really important to Tashira and myself is having some of these conversations at lots of different levels. The podcast itself is not meant for children. This episode is not particularly...
It's not too spicy.
Not too spicy, but the next episode will be. And I think there's a real space for that, and it's important to be able to have those conversations in an open and honest way. But it's not for everyone, and it's certainly not for children. Though a lot of the subjects that we are talking about are important for children to get engaged in. And reproductive justice, of course, is one, but social justice issues, voting, police brutality. And so it's our hope in the next couple months that we'll have some shorter, condensed episodes for younger people.
Yeah, absolutely.
One of the things we're going to do at the end of each episode is leave our listeners and ourselves with hope and something that we're hopeful for. So that can be lots of different things. But I think one of the things that is really important about this podcast is while we expect and hope to delve into some hard, controversial topics that we might not agree on, which is fine. But I'm right. No, I'm joking. That we leave the episode with hope.
Yeah.
Because how else are we going to sustain ourselves in this world that quite frankly is on fire?
Absolutely. And I think that I often think of Grace Lee Boggs, who said the biggest revolution of our lifetime will be a human revolution, not one that is socio-political, but a revolution that's based upon values. And I think hope is such an integral value for us being able to create a society that is full of justice.
Yes.
One that is equitable.
And that doesn't feel outside of us.
Exactly. Like we have the capacity. Hope is what creates that
Okay,
belief.
I just need you to stop for a second. So I know that we're doing this podcast and you have like this online persona and all this stuff. But do you remember when I really wanted you to run for office?
I would be the worst politician like in the world. Like I would literally
Why?
Because I would be in a scandal every single week, Margot. I would be off like somewhere on an island with somebody's granddaddy smoking weed on the side of a yacht twerking. No one would want to, pass a bill through Congress with a lawmaker like that. I mean,
But
yeah.
That's your own.
That's real talk.
What are you saying?
Yeah. So you're saying I could be like a thoughtician.
A thoughtician.
A thoughtician.
So continue, thoughtician. Continue with your hope.
As I was saying, so it requires hope, right? To sustain activism, to sustain any type of movement building, it requires hope. And so I think that it's very easy to become fatalistic. Yeah. Because of the times we live in.
Yeah, I also think it's really easy to kind of set your sights or your expectations on one person. And I think what I resonate with what you're saying is that hope is something that's achievable for all of us.
Absolutely.
And we have equal access to hoping for hope.
Now that's deep. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, so what am I hopeful for? What gives me hope is that I feel like over the last couple months, in very small ways, I've been really brave. And I think I feel very different in that bravery than I used to. And sometimes that makes me scared, but I'm not letting it stop me. It's ironic that we're taping today because today would have been the day that I would have been paid. And I didn't get a paycheck today.
Yeah.
For the first time in a really long time.
Yeah.
And I'm the fiscal manager of my family, you know that. So I'm checking our bank accounts, our credit card statements, paying our stuff, and check my bank account like I do the first of every month.
Yeah.
And I didn't get paid. And I was like, oh wow, I feel a certain way about that.
Yeah.
And I'm really trying to unpack why I feel that way and what that means. But I'm glad that I just like had the feeling and let it go.
And you let it go and you didn't rest in it.
No.
Yeah. That's called growth.
Yeah.
Growth. Yeah. I love that.
So that's giving me hope. And I'm hoping that some of the things we talk about, which I think are very timely and something that we both have done now, is leave pretty stable careers.
Yeah.
Actually, very stable careers. And while that has worked for us, and it certainly isn't going to work for a lot of people, it took a lot of bravery.
Absolutely. And you know how I feel that my life is pretty fucking fantastic.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, I mean, I feel
like,
like,
that way too.
Yeah.
About mine and yours.
If this was gummy bear juice, remember that show, like Gummy Bear Juice?
Wait, what?
You remember the show Gummy Bears? It was a cartoon. Gummy bears bouncing here and there.
No, it's called Care Bears.
No, that's a whole different show. Maybe y'all didn't have gummy bears up here. We watched the Gummy Bears, okay?
No, Care Bears that are in the sky.
No, they were on the ground and they had a satchel with juice in it. And when things got tough, they pulled the satchel out, they sipped the juice, and they were on 10. Like it was like some superpower shit. I'm on my gummy bear juice, is what I'm saying to you, Margot. I'm off the gummy bear juice. Life is lit. And although I have gone through a breakup of a very long-term relationship that was incredibly difficult, and I feel like I could have spiraled out of control. And my biggest fear that I kept saying to you was, I'm afraid that everything is going to fall apart. Mm-hmm. And things did not fall apart.
At all.
Because they were not intended to, right? And I think what I'm hopeful for is if I was able to grow to the point that I could look one of life's most difficult circumstances in the face and be like, all right, I'm sad, shit is fucked up, but we're gonna move forward. Mm-hmm. If I could do that and still be here, like fulfilling this dream with you, what does the next 10 years hold? What's the next level? Yeah. It's up and it's stuck.
You're going to have to focus a little bit more, though, on sleep.
Well...
But yes.
Sleep, what is it? Never heard of it. Don't need it.
Tashira's kind of self-care is very different than mine. And we're going to...
What is my self-care?
I mean, it's like a lot of partying.
This is true. I was hoping you were going to say that.
Actually. And I think it's well-deserved. I think I don't think you partied enough in your younger years.
No, I've been partying. I come from a family of partiers.
I think there was a good chunk of your 30s. Like
no, you're right. You're right.
Like your late 20s, early 30s.
Yeah.
Where you didn't party enough.
So you think I'm making up for that?
Yeah.
No, I'm not, Margot. I think that I have like sustainable partying. Like
that's great.
Yeah, no,
that's great.
I'm gonna party like this until I die. What are you talking about? You sound like I'm out here like off opiates and cocaine, no. Margot.
Let's go back.
Cocaine might be okay. But
let's go back to how incredibly resilient and strong and graceful you were in the face of something really, really hard. And I think one of the things that's also important to just say is that your ex is a wonderful person and also was a good friend to many of your friends. And so I think that was like an added layer. And maybe something we can talk about that might be a little more specific to same-sex relationships.
Mm-hmm.
That it's not like you can just like write someone off the same way where it's like, that fucking asshole, like, bah.
Like there's this like interweaving that happens in a different way when it's the same gender.
And I thought that you both, I don't know, I can't speak to that, but maybe you can. I thought you both handled it with a lot of grace, even through kind of really, really sad things.
Thank you.
And we're here.
Now we're here. And that gives us hope.
That gives us hope. So we're ending our first episode with some hope, and some excitement, and some real excitement about episode 2.
Absolutely.
So stay tuned. Episode 2 is not for children.
It's not for children. It's going to be very transparent. It is for
But
you.
I think it's something important that we don't talk about.
Absolutely.
Yeah, we don't talk about it. We're sex and dating in our 40s. What is that? What does that look like when you're single, when you're not single, when you're married? All the questions. I have lots of questions myself.
So do I. And I'm actively working to answer all of them.
Me too.
I will be the case study for the episode.
She will.
Yeah. So
Okay.
thank you all for tuning in.
Cheers.
Cheers.